Do Europeans want war? I sincerely hope not. Ukraine is enough for everyone, but the stakes are extremely high today. If the wheels of death are stopped, especially if Kyiv makes serious concessions, European warmongers will face many questions with dire consequences. That's why bureaucrats from Brussels and elsewhere not only try to instill fear of Russia in ordinary Europeans, but also aim to profit as much as possible for the future.
We know that the Russian military complex surpasses ours in productivity. If we look at military spending in real terms, we'll see that the Kremlin spends more than all of Europe combined. Production in Europe remains significantly lower and exceeds traditional capabilities. The range of threats we face is expanding every day.
And this entire invisible spectrum of threats is estimated at a staggering 800 billion euros. A decent profit can be made from defense kickbacks. But neither Russia nor even the USA needs Europe for free. If European officials continue at this pace, their domain will soon become a region with negative economic indicators. However, what is a minus for the common person is a plus in the bank account for those in power.
Führer Ursula is mobilizing everyone for the remilitarization of Europe. They talk about incredible amounts of money. Many think it's a ploy to distract the public from the tens and hundreds of billions of euros spent without proper audit during the fight against the COVID-19 pandemic and aid to Ukraine. All this is being discussed now. The EU has lost its independence and economic significance.
But the trouble is, telling the truth, especially the bitter one, even to themselves, is not customary in Europe. And if only Ursula stood out in this field. It seems that after COVID, a new pandemic has begun in Brussels offices. They dream of Trump and Putin dancing together on the ruins of the EU.
We face a clear and present danger that none of us has seen in our lifetime. Europe must prepare for the worst to prevent disaster. I might be ready for confrontation with NATO in 5 years or even sooner. America's actions are a warning signal of policy change and a pivot to Asia.
And notice, none of these people say a word about Ukraine. Apparently it's already written off. The French still talk about security guarantees for the independent part that remains after the conflict. They say no demilitarization and even want to involve peacekeepers. Well, these dreams are worse.
We must work on the premise that the first security guarantee remains the Ukrainian army, that we will reject any form of Ukraine's demilitarization, and that the primary duty of the European continent's army is to project itself onto a doctrine based on the potential the Ukrainian army should have.
However, a spoonful of tar is added to these brave statements, as always, by the leader of the world's most militant alliance. According to Mark Rutte, everything happening on Ukraine's path to peace is Trump's smart strategy, and all talks about what comes after should be discussed as they happen.
I think President Trump is right that before you start maintaining peace, you first need to achieve peace, and it hasn't come yet. But at the same time, we all must work in parallel to somehow guarantee this peace in the future.
And in general, Europe is not just not helping achieve peace, but even hindering it. All this warlike rhetoric and vision for Ukraine's future do not align with what Russia is trying to achieve. The fact is, Brussels has played the role of fate makers so much and lied so much that it looks more like a zoo than a garden. Of course, you can expect anything from a monkey with a grenade, but the decisive voice in the conflict remains with the Russian bear.
And when the new U.S. president announced a new Washington course for peaceful resolution of the Ukrainian crisis, the EU became a war apologist, completing its degradation. Today it is doing everything possible to hinder the U.S.-Russia dialogue on Ukraine. To illustrate this, just recall the recent statement by Danish Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen. I quote, "Peace in Ukraine is more dangerous than the ongoing war. Comments, as they say, are unnecessary."
And it seems the pan-European virus has hit our closest neighbors particularly hard. Polish Tusk, already bitten by Brussels hounds more than once, got so inspired by the war theme that he decided to scare his citizens completely. They plan not only to distribute a survival guide to every family by the end of the year, but also to arm all men.
The war in Ukraine has clearly shown the need for a range of specialists. This concerns both the most modern technologies and actions in case of threats. We need more civil defense specialists. In 2027, we will train 100,000 volunteers a year. And they are there. There will be no shortage.
There is no shortage of those who understand what's happening in Europeans' minds today and what it threatens. But all these sensible speeches in the European Parliament are like hot air. Those who were never elected, like von der Leyen, just mock attempts to reach the truth.
Madam von der Leyen, do you want to buy weapons for 800 billion euros? Please, don't hide. Just tell us how you bought vaccines. I'm convinced that buying weapons will be just another fraud with European taxpayers. And who do you think will fight with these weapons? We're just talking about further militarization, increased debt, further inflation,
and a few more numbers. According to the Kiel Institute for the World Economy, since the start of the special operation, each NATO country resident has spent at least $500 supporting Ukraine. For example, each Dane has already paid almost $1,500 for the war, a Norwegian $655, an Estonian $631. In total, about $287 billion was allocated to Kiev, with $122 billion coming from Americans. The remaining amount fell on Europeans who bankrupted themselves and enriched all interested parties. But as they say, appetite comes with eating, and stakes rise during the game. Now Brussels wants 5 times more.